Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Hernandez. I'm the chief of editors of Spartans Inc. And today, I'm starting a new series called Green Ink. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is Green Ink? Well, Green Ink is basically a series of podcast videos and interviews with me introducing different community members in our community locally. And as an environmentalist, I love meeting and different other people in different environments. And as a result, I'm here with to introduce people from different communities and hopefully, get to know some insight. And since today is the first episode, we had to come with a bang. And so today we're going to be meeting with an amazing community member and also a organizer, and his name is Andres Soto. Andres, how are you?
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. It's my
Mhm.
pleasure.
Great, great. Tell us about yourself, Andres.
Yeah, my name is Andres Soto, and I'm an organizer in Richmond with Communities for a Better Environment. We're a statewide environmental justice organization with projects in Richmond, East Oakland, in Wilmington in Southern California, Southeast LA, and Huntington Park in the LA region. Um, but I was born in Berkeley, and my family moved to San Pablo and Richmond when I was about 20 months old. So I grew up. I went to Bayview Elementary. I went to Helms Junior High, Richmond High School, Contra Costa, and then UC Berkeley. And really, my I'm the grandchild of immigrants from Mexico, and my parents were raised in an industrial region, steel mills in East Chicago, Indiana. We came to California in the mass migration after World War II. And so I've lived my whole life in the East Bay, and I consider myself an East Bay homeboy, straight out of Richmond. And that is, I raised my family there. I have two sons, Che and Alejandro, one who's a graduate from Cal, and then University of District Columbia Law School, and my other son is a graduate of UCLA. So we're a Chicano family who believes in education and building community power. And I came to working in the environmental justice movement, rather late in my career, but I've always been involved in advocacy for the improvement of the community.
That's amazing. That's super inspirational for growing up Chicano, members. What got you interested in working in for environmental justice?
Well, I think early on as a child, when I was in second grade, I got interested in birds. I really got deep into studying birds on my own. It wasn't something in school. And I began to learn stories about like the passenger pigeon and the Carolina parakeet, where these were species that became extinct because of human behavior. And the environmental movement as such had not really developed yet. And but I knew that there was this environmental component to life around me. And as I grew up, I began to see bird species that I had seen growing up in San Pablo disappear, and they weren't around anymore. So by the time I was in high school, this is when the environmental movement really first started to come together around a variety of issues. And in Richmond, it was about in the 1980s when we first started seeing the articulation of the issue of environmental justice as opposed to just the broader environmental movement. And environmental justice really resonates in a community like Richmond because it focuses on uh, this being one of the many injustices. Growing up in Richmond, we always had brutal police. We had certain neighborhoods that were segregated with African Americans and Latinos versus the whites and Asians and other parts of the community. We saw that there was poverty in those neighborhoods closest to the industrial facilities, and for the most part, then that linked into my political understanding of the real problem with Richmond was that the corporations were running the economy and the politics that resulted in these injustices and allowed and permitted things like police violence. And so environmental justice, when I came to it in 2012, CBE, Communities for a Better Environment, was an organization I had already been working with. I had been a member, and an opportunity to work for him as an organizer. I joined up, and 6 days later, Chevron blew up in the infamous August 6, 2012 explosion and fire. And the image behind me is a photo from that incident. And so since then, we've been working on trying to hold polluters accountable, trying to make the regulatory agencies, such as the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, accountable, as well as working to get Richmond City Council people elected through an organization I helped found, the Richmond Progressive Alliance, who are committed to not taking corporate money, especially Chevron money, and really exposing how that corporate money corrupts our political process.
That's really that was a lot to digest, honestly. That's a lot to digest. Now you mentioned a lot about politics and Chevron. What other environmental issues are there in Richmond that you've seen?
Well, in Richmond, Chevron is just one of several industrial polluters. You know, we also have Sims Metals and down there, and the Levin Coal Terminal, both on South 4th Street, just off of Cutting Boulevard, as well as the CMEX cement plant. I do these tours called Toxics and Resilience Tours, and I call that street the dirtiest street in Richmond because of the concentration of other polluters. We have the former California Oils Company, we have industrial gas companies. But one of the other key environmental issues in Richmond is we have legacy pollution, like the AstraZeneca site in Southeast Richmond, which was the former Stauffer Chemical Gold Bond chemical site. And the fact that, it is literally a EPA Superfund site because of the toxic stew of over 1,000 chemicals that are still in the soil there. And so because it is shoreline property, it becomes a target for developers. Just like the issue with the Point Molate, which used to be a naval fuel depot, it was given back to the city of Richmond to do something with to benefit the people. But people like our current mayor, Tom Butt, have engineered for developers, out-of-town developers, to come in and try to create massive housing projects on areas of extreme environmental sensitivity, just because they're more interested in money than they are in people and the quality of life. He lives in Point Richmond in his estate, so he's taking care of them. He's taking care of his sons. You know, one is on the planning commission, his daughter-in-law is on the design review board. So we have that kind of nepotism corruption that goes on as well. And so these are a number of the issues that we have to grapple with in Richmond. And just an example of how Chevron in particular has been able to insinuate itself into the community is the fact that Richmond High's mascot is called the Oilers. To me, that is an insult. I went to Richmond High, I played in the marching band, and it was embarrassing having a person dressed up in an oil can on the side of the football field or in the basketball games. So, it becomes political, it becomes cultural, it becomes economic, and we cannot separate those out from each other. And that's why one of the things we're looking at moving forward is to create a just transition for Richmond, where Richmond no longer is tethered to the former extractive economy that fossil fuels represent, but instead we are moving together to transform the economy into a sustainable, renewable type of economy.
Now, that was a lot also to digest also. a lot that I've also noticed that the mascot of Richmond Highs is a tin can. Like, what? You just like you don't really think about things like that. My school, we're Spartans. You know, uh, Hercules High, they're Titans, and now there's the tin cans. It's like, what? Now, since you were talking a lot about Chevron and all the horrible things that they've done, why are they still here? Why are they still in Richmond? Like, what?
Well,
Why is it?
yeah, so Chevron and the railroad, which is now the BNSF yard right across the street, right across Castle Road from the refinery, um, were both lured to Richmond at the turn of the 20th century. And they came together because in those days, there weren't automobiles and the oil industry was relatively new. And most of the oil that was being drilled was in Kern County, which is down near Bakersfield, where they're still drilling oil. And so the refinery showed up and was called Standard Oil of California. It was owned by John D. Rockefeller, who at that point was the world's richest person. He owned 95% of all the oil in the world. Eventually, they broke up his companies and it became Standard Oil of California. But what they did was they used it because of the deep water port, the fact that it's next to San Francisco Bay. They quarried out much of the land on the west side of what we now call Point Richmond. So where George Miller Park is, Miller Knox Park, that was a quarry. They blasted out all that rock to fill in marshes because Point Richmond used to be an island. So where the refinery is, where the rail yard is, that used to be water. And they filled it in and built these industrial facilities, and the town grew from there. So that was the basis of the economy, and they controlled the politics for really 100 years until we created the Richmond Progressive Alliance. I mean, when I say control the politics, I mean they had people on the city council that they selected. They would put the money behind them. The political parties would get behind them, and these people would get elected. In the 1980s, when we first had the very first direct elected mayor, because they used to rotate it on the city council, Tommy Corcoran was elected mayor. He was a former Chevron employee. And next to the city manager's office, a Chevron executive actually had a desk in there. So that's how insinuous they were. And so the Richmond Progressive Alliance came together in 2003, and myself and Gail McLaughlin were the first two candidates in 2004 to challenge that system. And, now we have a majority on the city council. So it's taken a number of years and many candidates to get into that position where we now have a majority and we can now start making some important political changes.
Wow, no, that was a lot. Um, my next question for you
There's a lot to
is
share.
a lot to share, a lot to share, a lot of history. I remember when you said Rockefeller, I remember that name from my history classes. It's like Rockefeller.
Well,
I remember.
they passed a bill in Congress called the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is famous because it was designed to break up monopolies, because the Standard Oil Company was a monopoly and was extremely powerful. And so that bill was directly targeted towards that company. And that's why it broke into Standard Oil of California as one of the 7 companies, which then became Chevron, or Standard Oil of New Jersey, which now is known as Exxon. So many of these companies are still around. They just changed the name.
Wow, that's crazy to think about, the gravity and all the damage that Chevron has done to our community. Um, how has your organization or other nonprofit organizations, because in Richmond there is other nonprofit organizations, environmentally or a health center for children such as Rise, how has those organizations helped this cause?
Well, the there's another organization called Asian Pacific Environmental Network. Everybody calls them APEN, that works with the Laotian immigrant community. They were refugees from the Vietnam War because they collaborated with the Americans in that war. So they had to be evacuated from their homeland, and they were dropped in our community into North Richmond, into San Pablo and Iron Triangle, the heart of the ghetto. And so they started getting impacted by that kind of uh, pollution, and they organized and created APEN. There's a number of other community organizations, like, I was one of the founding board members of the Rise Center, uh, and it was dedicated to helping young people develop into successful human beings, adults, really building on their own inherent interests and skills. So they're part of the fabric. But we have other organizations like, I know, you were affiliated with Groundwork Richmond, and the tree planting and the air monitoring and things that they have done as part of this. So there have been some good organizations out there doing the work. Unfortunately, Chevron has also used its money to co-opt or buy off people in the community who get money from Chevron, and then when it comes time to make decisions about whether or not to give them a permit to increase their pollution, unfortunately, we've seen some of those organizations stand up and defend Chevron, like the Latina Center, like the Richmond NAACP, like some of the neighborhood councils, like the West County Toxics Coalition. So organizations that should be standing up to Chevron, instead they get paid off and they defend Chevron. And some of those people will be on the steering committee that you were recently selected to be on. So, you have to know who you're dealing with and learn why they're saying what they're saying. So Richmond is a community with a lot of contentiousness because Chevron has been able to spread this money around. They even have a fake news service, online news service called the Richmond Standard. So they're trying to control Richmond and the surrounding communities the same way they've controlled third world countries like Nigeria and places like that.
Again, this is crazy to hear the truth come out and things like that unveil. You know, young people like myself don't really think about things like that. You know,
Well, that's why elders like myself have to share that and teach it with you, and that's why I'm really appreciative of you having me on your program today.
absolutely. We need amazing people such as yourself to step up and talk about your wisdom and tell us about all the horrible things that's happening and inform us about things that we can do. Now, that also transitions to my next question. What can young people do? Young people like myself, who's new to environmental justice, who wants to get into environmental justice. How can we start and help this cause?
Well, you're already doing some of that. You got affiliated with an organization that's addressing the issue. You're educating yourself not only on what are the causes of pollution, but what can be done about those causes. Um, it's also about understanding this deep history, both local, national, and global. Um, and it's about being committed to change. And we have to understand that it's been the American capitalist system that has created the income inequality. It's helped create the racism. It's helped create the divisions so that, people who are working class and poor end up fighting each other rather than focusing on the wealthy in our society and taking their money away from them, taking their power away from them, and redistributing it through the community so that all boats rise is the analogy that's frequently used. And we can learn from our history in the civil rights movement with groups like the Black Panthers and people like Malcolm X, where the government went so far as to assassinate them or facilitate the assassination of people like this, Fred Hampton, because of their challenging the fundamental principles of this country. And, we have to examine, for example, the Constitution is held up as some kind of like holy document, almost like the Bible in the United States, when in fact it is structured to disempower poor people and to preserve the power of the wealthy. That's why the Senate is in place. If we wanted real democracy in the United States, we need to change the Constitution, get rid of the Senate, get rid of lifetime appointment to the judiciary and the Supreme Court. I mean, why should a state like North Dakota, who has about the same amount of people as Santa Clara County, get two senators, just like California, who has 40 million people? The state of California has 40 million people. Why should they have equal power in the Senate, which is the upper house, and can quash anything that comes out of the House of Representatives, which is based on proportional representation of the population? These are the kind of fundamental changes that need to occur in the United States. And, if you work through governmental processes, you can reform, but that is not a revolution. And ultimately, the United States is going to need revolutionary change if we're ever going to change things like income inequality and environmental injustice.
Absolutely. I stand for what you said. And it's crazy to think about why do other states have more senators than just like California or different other states? This is very crazy to think about. You mentioned a word, equity. What is equity, and what does equity mean to you?
Mhm. Well, equity is a state of equality, things being equal. And, so to me, equity means everybody should have the same access to, a healthy living, healthy air, healthy water, healthy land, healthy food. Everybody should have equal opportunity for education. Everybody should have equal quality of housing, and everybody should have equal access to the political process. That does not exist in the United States, and it's rooted in the Constitution because the Constitution guarantees inequality. That's why people have had to fight to amend it. I mean, we're celebrating 100 years or last year of women getting the right to vote. That means for the majority of the country or the history of the country, women did not have the right to vote. So equity means equality and sharing, and the wealthy and the rich do not want to give it up. And so we have to figure out ways of taking it away from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I feel that I remember you mentioned something about a just transition for Richmond. And so I feel like equity, your version of equity is what's going to be incorporated for the just transition. Am I right? And also, can you please expand on the just transition? What is a just transition?
Yeah, well, just transition is a transition away from the extractive economy that creates these inequalities and a transition to one that is rooted in regeneration and sustainability, where the resources are distributed equally and everybody gets to have a just life, a life of justice in all those other areas I was talking about. Richmond needs that more than most communities, but it's a societal-wide problem, and we really see Richmond as a laboratory where we're putting these issues to task. We're taking them on and we're challenging them. That's why on March 18th, we're having a community town hall on decommissioning refineries, meaning how do we close down Chevron in a just way that doesn't leave Richmond stranded. We're part of the Richmond Our Power Coalition, which is a whole range of organizations in Richmond working together to create this transition to improve the life of the people in Richmond.
For sure, for sure. And the event he's talking about is called the Beyond Chevron Community Town Hall. New Year's, New Richmond is around the corner. if you're interested in joining things like that, I'm gonna leave it in the description down below, and for you to sign up and listen in and give your input about Richmond. And it's a good event, and I am also gonna be a part of that event also, and that's the thing. Um, now,
So Kevin, I have another meeting in about 2 minutes. So if we don't wrap this up, I would be glad later on this afternoon to finish this process with you. Does that work for you? I'm sorry that I have this time crunch.
it's fine. It's definitely okay. Um, so I'll just wrap this up. Thank you everyone for listening in. Uh, thank you, Mr. Soto, for being here. With this for this interview. We really appreciate this. Pinole Valley, and we would love to, help out Richmond and your organization as well. And I will leave all the information for Communities for a Better Environment down in the description below for anyone to sign up and join their youth or groups. Also,
Yeah, we have a youth membership group. One of my colleagues, Zolvo Namkadorj, works with students at Deanza High School and Richmond High School, and I'm sure she'd be glad to work with folks in Pinole as well. And I'd love to have another conversation with you. Just feel free to contact me and schedule it, and I'd be glad to do it.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Soto. Hope you have a great meeting, and thank you, everyone. So.
Thank you, Kevin.